You know you shouldn't be here, I whispered, pulling the sheets tighter around us. My voice trembled with guilt, but the thrill was undeniable. I knew I was playing with fire, but Eric's presence was intoxicating. I should have sent him away, but my body didn't want to let go. Eric smirked, running a finger down my arm. You've said that before, but here we are again. His voice, always so sure of itself, carried the weight of temptation. There was something about the way he spoke, like nothing mattered except the two of us in that moment. He was cocky, confident, and completely oblivious to the storm I could feel brewing. I sighed, knowing I was on the edge of a cliff but not wanting to back away. I don't know how long I can keep this up, I said softly, avoiding his gaze. It was true. Each time we met, it felt like the walls were closing in faster. Eric, ever the daredevil, leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. Stop worrying. Jeffrey won't be home for hours, right? We got time. But there was no ignoring the gnawing guilt that sat heavily in my chest. Jeffrey had been nothing but good to me. He was the reliable kind of husband, the type who worked long hours to give us a comfortable life. He deserved better than this. But Eric was a wild spark, unpredictable and exhilarating, the opposite of everything Jeffrey represented. I wanted to pull away, to end it, but the attraction between us had built its own momentum, something neither of us could easily stop. And maybe I didn't want to. Maybe this was my one way of rebelling against the mundanity of a marriage that had grown too predictable. The sound of a truck pulling into the driveway ripped me out of my thoughts like a bucket of cold water being dumped over my head. My stomach lurched as I recognized the deep hum of the engine. Jeffrey's home? I whispered, my voice strained with panic. I shot out of bed, grabbing the robe hanging from the chair next to me. My fingers trembled as I wrapped it around myself, every nerve in my body screaming at me to move faster. Eric sat up, eyes wide as he glanced towards the window. What? He wasn't supposed to be back for hours. His voice was no longer calm, his cockiness dissolving into raw panic. I frantically paced the room, my thoughts racing. I know, I hissed, my heart pounding like a drum. I hurried to the door, flipping the lock, as if that flimsy piece of metal would be enough to keep Jeffrey out. Just stay quiet, okay? We can figure this out. But my words didn't comfort me. I could hear Jeffrey's heavy boots hit the gravel outside as he got out of the truck. My pulse quickened, every fiber of my being knowing that something was terribly wrong. I couldn't let him find Eric here. Jeffrey was the calm type, never prone to anger, but I knew him well enough to know that betrayal wasn't something he would take lightly. The thought of what he might do if he walked into our bedroom and saw Eric there, it made my stomach turn. I stood frozen, listening as the front door creaked open. Jeffrey's footsteps echoed through the house, slow, deliberate. Eric got up from the bed, still naked, his face drained of color. What the hell is he doing? I strained to hear, my ears catching the heavy sound of something being dragged across the floor. Then, the sudden roar of a chainsaw filled the house, the deafening sound cutting through the silence like a blade. My blood ran cold. What the hell? Eric's face turned ghostly white, his bravado evaporating as reality hit him. What's he doing? He whispered, voice trembling for the first time since I'd known him. His bravado was slipping, and fear was taking its place. He stepped towards the window, glancing outside as if calculating his escape. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound of the chainsaw grew louder, closer. Jeffrey was coming up the stairs. He's coming up the stairs, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the relentless grinding of the chainsaw. My entire body felt frozen, locked in place by fear. What? Eric's voice shot up a pitch. Panic surged through him, and he darted to the window, completely naked, fumbling to unlatch it. I'm not sticking around to find out what he's going to do. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. There was no time to think, no time to plan. Before I could say anything, Eric flung the window open, his eyes wide with desperation. He looked back at me, his face a mask of fear, but there was no time for second thoughts. He leaped out of the window, glass shattering as his body crashed through it. The chainsaw stopped. Silence fell over the house. I didn't have time to wonder if Eric had made it or if Jeffrey had seen him. The bedroom door splintered open with a violent crash, wood flying in every direction. I stumbled back, eyes wide, as Jeffrey stepped into the room, the chainsaw hanging limply from his hand, no longer running. His face was expressionless, but his eyes, they were dark, cold, unlike anything I had ever seen in him before. He looked at the open window, then back at me. Scaredy-Cat ran away? His voice was eerily calm, his lips curling into a slight grin that made my skin crawl. Too bad I placed something in his car. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My body was frozen in place, every muscle locked in terror as I stared at the man who had once been my husband, the man I thought I knew. But this wasn't Jeffrey. This was someone else, someone terrifying. Jeffrey took a step closer, his boots thudding heavily against the floor. "Say goodbye to him one last time," he said, his voice low, almost taunting. My throat tightened, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. "Well, what do you mean?" "Don't worry, my love," he said, the words dripping with a venomous calm. "Look, I've got a surprise for you, too." I reacted without thinking. I bolted for the door, my heart racing as my feet hit the floor, slipping on the smooth hardwood as I ran down the hallway. Behind me, I heard Jeffrey's laughter, low and cruel, chasing me like a shadow. "Run all you want, sweetheart," his voice echoed down the hallway. "You're not going anywhere." I stumbled into the living room, my hands fumbling for my phone. My fingers trembled as I tried to dial 911, but before I could press the final number, a sharp, searing pain shot through my wrist. I screamed. The phone clattered to the floor as I looked down in horror. My left hand, was gone. Blood poured from the ragged stump where my wrist ended, my wedding ring still gleaming on the severed hand, now lying on the floor. Pain overwhelmed me. My vision blurred, and the world around me began to spin. I heard Jeffrey's voice, distant and cruel. "You should have stayed faithful, my love." The last thing I saw before everything went black was the sight of my own blood staining the hardwood floor, and then darkness swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I lay there, unconscious. Hours? Minutes? But when I finally came to, the pain was the first thing I noticed. It throbbed in waves, radiating from the stump of my wrist. I opened my eyes to find myself on the front lawn, the sky a cold shade of gray above me. My body was weak, and I couldn't move. The sound of tires crunching on gravel reached my ears, followed by hurried footsteps. I heard a man's voice, panicked, urgent, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I tried to speak, to call for help, but my voice was barely a whisper. My vision blurred again, and as I faded back into darkness, I felt a pair of hands lifting me, and I got some sense from the voice. It was our usual delivery man, carrying me away from the nightmare I had created. When I woke up again, everything would be different. The first thing I registered was the cold, sterile smell of the hospital. The steady beeping of a heart monitor filled the room, rhythmic and haunting. Pain coursed through me as I blinked into consciousness, trying to shake the fog that clouded my mind. I shifted, wincing at the sharp jolt that shot up my left arm. Instinctively, I looked down and froze. Bandages were wrapped tightly around where my hand had once been. It was gone just like that. The weight of the reality crashed down, and I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could turn back time, undo everything that led to this moment. My throat was dry, and when I tried to speak, a weak croak came out instead. I swallowed hard, forcing words. "Water." A nurse, who had been checking the 4-drip, turned to me with a soft, practiced smile. She brought a cup of water with a straw to my lips. "You're awake. Just take it slow, dear. You've been through a lot." I took a few sips, the cool water soothing my parched throat, but I didn't feel any better. My heart pounded as fragments of that night came rushing back. Eric, his wide, terrified eyes as he leaped out the window. Jeffrey's grin, the way he held that chainsaw so casually. And then the pain in my hand. I felt my chest tighten as panic clawed its way up my spine. "Jeffrey," I muttered, barely able to get the word out. The nurse's smile faded. Before I could ask anything else, the door to my room swung open. A man in a dark suit, with tired eyes and a no-nonsense expression, stepped inside. He carried a notepad and wore an air of authority. "Mrs. Kinsley?" His voice was low, but serious. "I'm Detective Parker. I need to ask you a few questions." I struggled to sit up, but the pain in my side kept me pinned to the bed. The nurse adjusted my pillows, trying to make me more comfortable, but I hardly noticed her. My mind was racing. My husband," I stammered, ignoring the soreness in my throat. "Where is he? What happened? Where's Jeffrey?" Detective Parker exchanged a glance with the nurse before pulling up a chair next to my bed. He took a moment, as if preparing himself for what he had to say. "Mrs. Kinsley, we've been trying to locate your husband since the incident," he began, his tone measured. "But it appears he's disappeared. We believe he's left the country. His truck was found abandoned near a private airstrip. We haven't been able to track him down." My stomach lurched, the air sucked out of my lungs. "Jeffrey was gone? Vanished? What do you mean, disappeared?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "He just left?" Parker leaned forward slightly, his expression softening. "We believe he planned this, ma'am. Everything points to him leaving the country shortly after what happened." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. The detective's words felt distant, like they were coming from the other side of a tunnel. My thoughts were racing in 100 different directions. None of this made sense. Jeffrey was meticulous, yes, but to vanish like this? It was too calculated, too cold. It wasn't him, or at least it wasn't the version of him I thought I knew. Before I could process it all, another question surged to the forefront of my mind. "Eric, what about Eric?" My voice trembled. Detective Parker exhaled slowly, his face hardening as he prepared to deliver more bad news. "We found Eric's car about 5 miles from your house. There was an explosion." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "He didn't make it." I stared at him, unblinking. The words didn't compute at first. Explosion? Dead? Eric, who had been in my bed, who had jumped out of the window in a frantic escape, was gone? No, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "How?" Parker's gaze didn't waver. "Your husband rigged the car. It was a sophisticated bomb, set to detonate once Eric started the engine. By the time we reached the scene, there was nothing anyone could do." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Kinsley." It hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. I felt the world spinning, the sterile hospital room growing darker, suffocating. Eric was dead. And Jeffrey. Jeffrey had killed him. I squeezed my eyes shut, my mind spiraling. How had it come to this? How had everything unraveled so quickly? Just days ago, my biggest worry had been sneaking around without Jeffrey finding out. Now I was in a hospital missing a hand, and both men in my life were gone, one dead, the other a fugitive. "Mrs. Kinsley?" The detective's voice pulled me back to the present. I opened my eyes, struggling to focus. "I know this is a lot to take in, but we need to ask you some questions about that night. Anything you can tell us might help." My throat tightened as flashes of that horrific night came flooding back. I didn't want to relive it, but what choice did I have? I don't know where to start, I whispered, my voice shaking. It all happened so fast. Parker nodded patiently, flipping open his notepad. "Take your time. Just tell me what you remember." I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment, and began to speak. "Jeffrey wasn't supposed to be home that early. I thought we had more time." My words trailed off as I pictured the moment Eric had jumped from the window, panic in his eyes. "Eric was there?" Parker asked, his voice carefully neutral. I nodded. "Yes, we were together, in the bedroom. When we heard Jeffrey's truck pull up, we panicked. I locked the door. I thought it would buy us some time." My voice trembled as I remembered the sound of Jeffrey's boots, the chainsaw. Parker leaned in slightly. "And then I heard it, the chainsaw." The words felt surreal even as I spoke them. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe it was some kind of sick joke, but when I heard him coming up the stairs, my voice broke and I paused, swallowing hard. That's when Eric jumped out the window. He didn't even grab his clothes. He just ran. Parker scribbled in his notepad, his face unreadable. "And Jeffrey? What did he do when he came into the room?" He smiled. I whispered, feeling a fresh wave of nausea roll through me. "He looked at the window and said something about Eric being scared. Then he told me, He told me to say goodbye. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. He said he put something in Eric's car. I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but now, my voice faltered, the enormity of what had happened crushing down on me. Parker didn't say anything for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentler now. I know this is difficult, Mrs. Kinsley, but your husband is dangerous, and we need to find him before he does something like this again. Do you have any idea where he might have gone? I shook my head, my mind blank. No, I don't know. He was different. This wasn't the Jeffrey I knew. Parker's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. People don't just change overnight. Something must have triggered this. I thought back, trying to piece together the moments leading up to that night. Jeffrey had been distant, sure, but I never imagined he was capable of this. He knew. I whispered, realization dawning on me. He must have known about Eric for longer than I thought. That's why he did this. He was planning it. The room seemed to grow colder as the truth settled in. Jeffrey had been waiting, watching, plotting his revenge while I had been sneaking around behind his back. I had underestimated him, and now Eric was dead, and I was missing a hand. Parker stood, his expression grave. We'll do everything we can to find him, Mrs. Kinsley. But in the meantime, you're safe here. Focus on recovering. I nodded, though I didn't feel safe at all. As the detective left, the nurse returned, checking my vitals, offering comforting words. But nothing could quiet the storm of guilt and fear raging inside me. I was alive, but I had lost everything. And somewhere out there, Jeffrey was still free, with who knew what plans in mind. Days passed in a haze of sterile hospital lights and hushed conversations. The monotony of the beeping machines and nurses moving in and out of the room became my new reality. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I sat in bed, my bandaged wrist a constant, painful reminder of the nightmare I couldn't wake from. Each police interrogation, each visit from Detective Parker, only added to the feeling of helplessness settling into my bones. Jeffrey had vanished, just like that, slipping through the cracks as if he had never existed. The man I had once loved, the man I had built my life with, had not only destroyed my world, but had meticulously planned it all. He was gone, taking everything I had worked for with him, our home, our savings, everything. And I was left with nothing. One afternoon, as I lay in bed staring out the hospital window, the sound of the door opening pulled me from my thoughts. Detective Parker stepped inside, his face grim but purposeful. He had been coming by regularly, updating me on the investigation, but I could tell by his expression that today, something was different. Mrs. Kinsley, he began, standing near the foot of the bed. We have new information. It looks like we've got a lead on your husband's whereabouts. I straightened, my pulse quickening. Where? South America, Parker said, flipping through the pages of his notepad. We've received reports from a source down there. There's a man who matches his description, moving from town to town, using fake identities. He looked up at me, gauging my reaction. We believe it's him. A flicker of hope sparked in my chest, but it was quickly snuffed out by the weight of reality. Can you catch him? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Parker hesitated, then shook his head slightly. It's not that simple. He's covering his tracks, changing names and appearances regularly. He's smart, and he knows how to evade capture. But we're working with local authorities, and we'll continue to follow every lead. Frustration boiled beneath the surface, a mixture of anger and desperation that I could barely contain. So what am I supposed to do? I snapped, my voice trembling with emotion. Just sit here and wait while he's out there, free to do whatever he wants? He's already taken everything from me. What else could he possibly want? Parker met my gaze, his expression softening but still firm. I know this is hard, Mrs. Kinsley, but men like your husband, men who plan things as meticulously as he did, they don't always stop after they've caused the initial damage. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes the thrill of the hunt keeps them going. His words sent a chill down my spine. I thought back to Jeffrey's expression that night, the calm, almost satisfied look in his eyes as he held the chainsaw. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about control. He had wanted me to suffer, and now, even with him gone, the fear lingered. You think he'll come after me again? I said, more a statement than a question. Parker didn't answer right away, but the silence was enough. He rubbed his temples and leaned forward slightly. We can't be certain, but we believe it's a possibility. Men like him don't always let go that easily. That's why we're taking precautions. We'll be keeping a close eye on your situation, but I also need you to be vigilant. I scoffed, bitterness creeping into my voice. Vigilant? How? I'm stuck in this hospital with no money, no house, and no future. What am I supposed to do, detective? He didn't flinch at my words. We'll arrange for protection once you're discharged. In the meantime, we need to make sure you stay safe. If Jeffrey tries to contact you, or if you notice anything suspicious, anything at all, you need to let us know immediately. He's dangerous, Mrs. Kinsley. And until we catch him, you need to assume the worst. The detective's words hung in the air, a heavy weight pressing down on me. The idea that Jeffrey might still be out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again, was almost too much to bear. I had thought I knew him, but the man who had smiled at me with that chainsaw in hand was a stranger. And now, he was a ghost, haunting me from the shadows. I just don't understand. I muttered, more to myself than to Parker. Why would he do this? We had a life together. Why didn't he just leave if he was that unhappy? Parker leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. It's hard to say. People don't always make sense, especially when emotions are involved. But from what we've gathered, this wasn't just about the affair. He was planning something bigger, something more calculated. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. So this was all? Premeditated? He didn't just snap? Parker nodded grimly. That's what we believe. He must have known about Eric for some time, and instead of confronting you, he waited. He planned. It's possible that he took the affair as a personal betrayal, but his actions go beyond just revenge. This was about control, about making sure you felt the consequences in the worst way possible. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. All this time, I had thought Jeffrey was oblivious, that I was getting away with something. But in reality, he had been watching, waiting, plotting his revenge while I lived in denial. The thought made me feel sick to my stomach. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Parker stood, tucking his notepad back into his pocket. Now, we keep looking, we follow the leads, and we try to bring him in before he does any more damage. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that this could take time. In the meantime, focus on your recovery. We'll be here to help you. As he turned to leave, a thought struck me, and I called after him. Detective, do you really think he'll try to contact me? Parker paused at the door, his hand resting on the knob. He glanced back at me, his expression unreadable. Men like Jeffrey don't always do what you expect, Mrs. Kinsley. But if he does reach out, it won't be for reconciliation. It'll be to remind you that he's still in control. With that, he left, the door closing softly behind him. I sat in the stillness, my mind racing. Jeffrey was out there, somewhere, and the idea that he might try to find me again sent a wave of dread coursing through me. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt truly vulnerable. I wasn't just recovering from a physical injury. I was recovering from the wreckage of my life, and the man responsible was still out there, waiting to strike again. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the hospital building making my heart race. The shadows seemed to stretch and move, and in my mind, they all carried Jeffrey's face, cold, calculating, always watching. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. The hunt had just begun. Weeks turned into months, and the search for Jeffrey stretched on like a never-ending nightmare. The police investigation had slowed to a crawl, their leads drying up, and every time Detective Parker visited, his updates were less and less hopeful. Jeffrey had disappeared so completely that it was as if he had never existed. I was trying to rebuild my life, but the shadow of Jeffrey's betrayal clung to me, making it impossible to move on. I had started physical therapy for my missing hand, and while I was making progress, each session was a painful reminder of what I had lost, not just physically but emotionally. The man who had once held my heart in his hands had turned into a monster, leaving destruction in his wake. One rainy afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the empty space where my wedding ring used to sit. The doorbell rang. Startled, I glanced toward the front door, my heart racing. I wasn't expecting anyone. I stood slowly, walking toward the door. The sound of the rain hitting the roof was almost deafening in the silence of the house. When I opened the door, no one was there. But sitting on the doorstep was a small package, plain brown, no markings except for the handwritten label addressed to me. My blood ran cold. The handwriting was Jeffrey's. I picked up the package with trembling fingers, staring at the familiar scrawl of his handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away, to pretend I had never seen it, but something stopped me. Curiosity, fear, maybe both. I carried it inside, setting it down on the kitchen table. For a long moment, I just stared at it, my mind racing with possibilities. Could it be a trap? Another one of Jeffrey's twisted games? I grabbed a pair of scissors, cutting the tape carefully. My hands shook as I opened the box. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, was a small black velvet box. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly lifted the lid. Inside was my wedding ring, the same ring Jeffrey had cut from my hand the night he disappeared. But something was different. The inside of the band had been engraved with 2 words, "I'm waiting." I dropped the box, my heart hammering in my chest. The ring clattered to the floor, but I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. My mind raced with thoughts, a dizzying whirlwind of fear and anger. Jeffrey was back, or he had never really left. I reached for my phone, dialing Detective Parker's number with shaking fingers. When he picked up, his voice was calm and steady, as always. "Detective Parker," I said, my voice trembling. "I just got a package. From Jeffrey." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Parker spoke again, his tone now serious. "I'm on my way. Don't touch anything. Lock the doors and stay inside." I hung up, my fingers still shaking. I glanced back at the ring lying on the floor, the words "I'm waiting" echoing in my mind. I locked the door, every creak in the house suddenly feeling like a threat. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. When Parker finally arrived, he was accompanied by another officer. They entered cautiously, both of them scanning the house as if expecting Jeffrey to jump out from the shadows. "Where's the package?" Parker asked, his eyes meeting mine. I pointed to the table, where the box still sat, the ring now resting on the floor beside it. Parker knelt down, examining the contents carefully. He picked up the ring, his eyes narrowing as he read the engraving. "I'm waiting," he muttered, shaking his head. He looked up at me. "This confirms it. He's still out there, and he's still playing games." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Parker stood up, his expression grim. "We increase security. We'll put officers on patrol around the house, but we need to be careful. Jeffrey's unpredictable, and he's clearly planning something. If he's watching you, we need to make sure you're protected." I nodded, but a cold dread settled in my stomach. No amount of police protection could change the fact that Jeffrey was still out there, somewhere, and he was toying with me. The days after the package arrived were suffocating. Every sound, every shadow felt like it was him, Jeffrey. Watching, waiting. The police presence outside my home offered little comfort. Deep down, I knew that if Jeffrey wanted to come for me, no number of officers would stop him. One night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. My heart leapt into my throat as I reached for it. A text message from an unknown number. "It's time. Meet me where it all began." My blood turned to ice. There was no need to ask who it was. I knew. It was Jeffrey, and he wanted me to meet him. I debated what to do. Call the police? Tell Detective Parker? But something inside me, whether it was fear or some twisted sense of closure, made me decide otherwise. This had to end. I couldn't live in fear anymore. I dressed quickly, pulling on a jacket as I slipped out of the house without alerting the officers outside. My heart pounded in my chest as I walked to the car. Where it all began. I knew exactly where Jeffrey wanted me to go. The old cabin by the lake. It was where we had spent our honeymoon, a place that had once held happy memories. Now, It was nothing but a symbol of the destruction of everything I had once held dear. The drive felt like it took hours, though in reality, it was only about 30 minutes. The cabin loomed ahead, dark and silent. I parked the car a short distance away, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I stared at the dilapidated building. A light flickered on inside. He was here. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air biting at my skin. My feet felt heavy as I made my way toward the cabin, every step filled with dread. When I reached the door, it was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, the creak of the old wood echoing in the stillness. Inside, the small living room was dimly lit by a single lamp. And there, sitting in one of the old chairs, was Jeffrey. He looked different, thinner, more gaunt. But his eyes still held that same cold, calculating look I had seen the night he disappeared. "You came," he said, his voice calm, almost welcoming. I swallowed hard, my heart racing. "What do you want, Jeffrey?" He smiled, standing slowly. "I just wanted to see you again. After everything." I took a step back, fear clawing at my chest. "You've destroyed my life. You've taken everything from me. Why are you still doing this?" Jeffrey's expression darkened. "Because you betrayed me, and you never paid the price." He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You think losing your hand was enough? You think losing Eric was enough?" My breath caught in my throat. "What do you want from me?" He moved faster than I expected, grabbing my wrist and pulling me close. His face was inches from mine, his grip tight and unrelenting. "I want you to feel what I felt," he whispered. "I want you to know what it's like to lose everything." Before I could react, I heard the sound of a gun cocking behind me. "Let her go, Jeffrey." I turned to see Detective Parker standing in the doorway, his gun aimed at Jeffrey's head. Jeffrey's grip loosened for a moment, and I pulled away, stumbling back. "It's over, Jeffrey," Parker said, stepping closer. "You're not in control anymore." For a moment, Jeffrey's face twisted in anger, but then he smiled, an eerie, unsettling smile. "You think you've won," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You think this is over?" Without warning, Jeffrey lunged for me again, but before he could reach me, a shot rang out. He froze, his eyes wide in shock, before crumpling to the floor. Parker lowered his gun, his expression hard. "It's over." I stood there, shaking, my mind unable to process what had just happened. Jeffrey was gone, for good this time, and as I looked down at his lifeless body, I felt nothing but relief. It was finally over. The nightmare had ended.